Our pleasure to be here in Lyon today. I'd like to warmly welcome you to our workshop on bioenergy in a net zero future. So as you are all well aware, we need to turn to net zero emissions globally by 2050. And this means that we need to do an unprecedented change into our energy system. And the role of bioenergy in this is an essential one. So in IEA's net zero emissions by 2050 roadmap, bioenergy needs to rise to 100 exajoule in 2050, which represents 20% of the energy needed in that year. So today we will take a look at the technologies. How can bioenergy contribute? And that is a at least threefold contribution that bioenergy can make here to this change. So one is to substitute for fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions. Another is to provide flexibility in a system, especially an electricity system that will be dominated also by other renewables that vary, so wind and solar. And also bioenergy can provide negative emissions since we can capture the carbon and store it. So on behalf of IEA Bioenergy, I'd like to warmly welcome you to this workshop. IEA Bioenergy is one of the IEA's technology collaboration programs. We have 25 countries and regions from across the globe, so we are a truly international network. We have around 200 experts working together with us on advancing the deployment and development of bioenergy technologies and on undertaking system analysis. This is a high-level expert network, meaning it is experts talking to experts, and that is a really valuable thing. So in my role as chair of IEA Bioenergy, I warmly welcome you to this workshop. We are hosting this workshop together with ADEME, and that's why Emilie Machefaux is co-moderating the first session with me. So Emilie is head of the Renewable Heat Department at ADEME, and ADEME is the French agency for the ecological transition. And I hand over to you, Emilie.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. So thank you, Dina. And yes, ADEME is a French public agency for ecological transition. So we are under the supervision of the Ministry for Ecological and Energy Transition and the Ministry of Higher Education and Research. So we participate in the construction of national and local policies for ecological transition. Our areas of intervention are climate change, renewable energy, energy management, and also bioeconomy. And our budget to intervene is around 4 billion euros. It allows us to support local authorities and companies in their ecological transition. So ADEME and the French stakeholders have been involved in technological collaboration program, TCP, on renewable energy for many years now. And we are present in 17 TCP, so it's quite a lot. And today we are very happy to welcome you for this workshop, which aims to discuss the role of bioenergy in the transition to a carbon-neutral energy system. So just to give you a few words, at ADEME, at the end of 2020, we published a foresight exercise called Transition 2050. You can find all the documents on our website. And the objective was to debate four concrete contrasting paths, sector by sector, to achieve carbon neutrality. And among the main conclusions, the scenarios has confirmed that the essential role of biomass energy in the French energy transition. But it's also confirmed that the biomass consumption would increase sharply to meet all use in the construction sector, in chemistry, and in energy. So there is a challenge for agricultural and forestry sectors to ensure this increase without unbalancing system, meaning that we have to take care about carbon storage, for example. And it confirms also the need to have a systemic vision of the availability of the resource in France and the expected uses of biomass. So biomass is a renewable but limited resource. So for ADEME, the planification will therefore be necessary to meet local and national needs. So speaking in local authorities, I would like to give the floor to Emmanuel Goy, who is the regional director at ADEME in Aura, so Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes.
Merci, bonjour. Thank you very much. So I'm from the regional office of ADEME, which is just across the road. I'm very happy to welcome all of you here today because it's really great to see people and colleagues coming from nearly all over the world to share practices and information on our important subjects. And to thank you all, as I'm the local, I will start by giving you the best local tip you can get. It's called Bernachon, and it's the best chocolate maker of the universe. And it's just down this avenue, somewhere on the left-hand side, going to the River Rhône. I will also give you a couple of examples of issues we have on biomass energy in this region. So this region is called Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. It is as big as a very wonderful country, Austria, to give you an idea. It's also in France the region where we have the biggest amount of standing wood. And it's also the region where we have the biggest amount of poor air quality zones. Welcome in one of them. Of course, we know that wood energy is only a little part of air pollution, but it plays a significant role anyway. And especially individual use of wood energy, fireplaces, old stoves. And to tackle this, some open fireplaces are banned in some areas here. I'm sure you've heard of Chamonix-Mont-Blanc. Well, in this area, it is forbidden to use an open fireplace. And we at ADEME with local authorities, we give some subsidies to the owners for them to get rid of open fireplaces or old stoves and to replace that with brand new, very efficient stoves, which is very efficient to reduce air pollution. And it is also very efficient to reduce wood consumption for the same amount of heat produced. So it helps us to save the resource. And as Emilie said, we need to spare all the wood we can because there won't be enough for all the uses. Final example, the last big wood boiler we have financed here in this region is here in Lyon. It's a 50 megawatt plant for the district heating of the whole city. And it is equipped with thermodynamics condensers, which also reduce wood consumption and also reduce dust and small particles emissions. And this afternoon you are going to visit in Saint-Fond, a plant that produces gas from solid biomass waste. So I'm not surprised Lyon was chosen for this meeting. Thank you again for coming here, and wish you a nice day, and please enjoy your stay in this wonderful city.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So with this, it is time to go into the first session of this workshop today, which is on the role of bioenergy in energy transition strategies. And we start with the view of the International Energy Agency. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jeremy Moorhouse, who is a biofuels lead in the renewable energy division of IEA. The floor is yours.
To rearrange myself here. Okay. So thank you very much for coming today. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to share the bioenergy, our look at bioenergy's role in our net zero scenario. And then complement that with where we are today with bioenergy to try to identify some of the barriers to getting onto a net zero pathway, and then some of the different options for accelerating expansion of bioenergy globally. Now, the case for moving towards a transition to net zero and getting us on track for a 1.5 degree target has never been stronger. Just in 2022, emissions increased from 1% from pre-pandemic levels. And despite that increase, we still think there's a viable but challenging pathway to net zero. Now, this scenario that's been developed incorporates over 500 different technologies, looks at the supply chains that would be necessary to develop to roll out those technologies consistent with net zero, and the types of policies that would be needed to be implemented to achieve the outcome that you see on the screen. And this is a net zero path, so emissions themselves don't go to zero, but the net emission reductions do, and part of that's because of things like BECS, which we mentioned in the introduction. Now, some of the high-level messages coming out of this analysis is that we have the tools today to go much faster on this net zero pathway. Most of the emission reductions that would be needed out to 2030 are from commercial technologies. This would require a tripling of renewable capacity, a doubling of energy efficiency improvements, and a 75% reduction in methane emissions. So there's some of the big conclusions coming out of this analysis. Now, we're here today to talk about bioenergy. So from now on, I'll focus on bioenergy's role. So modern bioenergy is the giant of renewable energy today. We're in a group of experts, so I think you already know this. Modern bioenergy provides half of renewable energy supply today and about 6% of total global energy supply. On a net zero pathway out to 2030, this expands to 13% of global energy supply and maintains a large share of renewable energy provision as well. If I were to take this out to 2050, that share grows to 20% of total energy supply. So bioenergy is really one of the pillars along the energy transition globally. Now, something I find interesting when looking at this analysis as well is not only is it a pillar out to 2050, but actually in the near term, it is the largest source of new low-emitting energy supply. It outpaces solar, it outpaces wind, it outpaces other renewables and other low-emitting sources that come online over the next 8 years in this scenario. And so it's a critical role in the near term. And that's in part because it's compatible with a lot of our energy systems today. It can participate in transportation, industrial heat, power provision, and so can be rolled out relatively quickly. Now, looking at where it plays a role, we see that total demand growing to around 100 exajoules out to 2050. There's a lot of information on this graph. I'll draw your attention to 3 big pieces. I think I have a laser on here somewhere. Here. This right here is the traditional use of biomass, and we see that going down to 0 by 2030. For those that aren't familiar with IEA lexicon, the traditional use of biomass is its use in inefficient applications like open pit fires for cooking or heating. So by design in this scenario, the net zero scenario tries to achieve full universal access to modern energy services by 2030. And so we see that decline, and that frees up some of those resources to be used in more efficient applications for heating, cooking, or converted into other supplies like liquid biofuels or biogases. A second area I'll point your attention to is this green area. This is mostly solid biomass. And it has a very important role to play in balancing power provision and also through BECCS to remove additional emissions. Now, its share of the total demand is quite big on the bioenergy side. If we flip this and look at where it's used, it's actually a relatively small but very important part of some of these other sectors. For the power sector, this piece here is providing about 4% of electricity supply around the world. So it's a small component, but incredibly important. The last piece I'll draw your attention to is the liquid biofuels. Now today, almost all of liquid biofuels are used in road transportation. As we move out to 2050, that switches to almost all of it being used in shipping and aviation fuels. So while there's a significant growth where that's being used changes over that forecast period. And we're starting to see some of those changes today. Now, can't talk about bioenergy without commenting on sustainability. As everyone here knows and everyone online, only modern sustainable bioenergy has a role to play in these net zero scenarios. In the modeling for net zero, we set very strict sustainability bounds on the types of biomass supply that can fit the scenario. Two of the land-based bounds are there's no overall increase in cropland dedicated to bioenergy supply, and there's no encroachment on forests beyond what's used today. And things like protected areas are also built in as no-go zones in the model for accessing bioenergy supplies. Oops. If we then look at how this compares to other scenarios that have been used for net zero, it's the most conservative scenario that I'm aware of. And that 100 exajoules is well below, sometimes 1/3 some of the other scenarios out there. So I think this is a fairly conservative and achievable estimate of biomass supply potential in moving to along a net zero scenario. That's the net zero pathway. This is an aim, a desired endpoint. If I look today, are we on this pathway? The answer is no. Not just for bioenergy, that's the case for many technologies. But in bioenergy's case, solid biomass, the use of biogases, the use of liquid biofuels, none of these technologies are on track with a net zero scenario. I'm going to go in a bit more detail on liquid biofuels as the example. So if you look at liquid biofuel demand globally, it's well below this net zero pathway here, which is consistent with some of the other information I've been showing you. The scale of growth and the types of biofuels that are coming online are not growing at a pace consistent with that pathway. Now, for me, there's a number of barriers that we could discuss on this. I'll raise two big ones. Number one is the production of liquid biofuels is really concentrated in a small set of markets. The United States, Brazil, Indonesia, India, and Canada represent 80% of the growth that's happening around the world. So that's one key barrier, this concentration in only a few markets. Getting to net zero will require expansion in those markets as well as other places around the world. And it's not only just the markets, it's also the types of fuels that are being produced. Near 100% of the fuels used in road transport today. And even if I look at this forecast, that is still about 98% by 2027 in this forecast. So you need to see a quicker shift as well to shipping and aviation fuels. A second barrier that's related is feedstock supply. We can't have a conversation about biofuels without talking about where all the material is going to come from to produce these fuels. And we're already starting to see at this level of growth some constraints on some of the fats, oils, and greases that are needed to make biodiesel, renewable diesel, biojet, some of the fuels that are absolutely critical to get to this endpoint. And we're well below the level of expansion that we need. So those are two big barriers that we see. I don't want to end on a negative note. Those are some of the big barriers. We're not on track, but actually, been looking at a lot of detailed liquid biofuels the last 3 years. Some of the trends are actually starting to align with the net zero pathway, just not at the pace and scale that we want, but they're moving in the right direction. So one, on this feedstock discussion, if I look at all the different projects that are being proposed around the world right now, there's a lot of interest in novel feedstocks, new feedstocks that bypass some of these constraints that I mentioned on the last slide. If I add up all of these projects, it's near 20% of new biofuel supply over the next, well, this goes to 2030, so the next seven years. We're also seeing a lot of the policies that governments are putting in place starting to value greenhouse gas reductions as part of the policies, not just volumes, not just energy supply. And that's important because one of the aims with biofuels is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So putting those targets on that part helps to make sure that we're using the most efficient biofuel pathways that deliver the biggest greenhouse gas reduction. That's not to say bioenergy doesn't provide other benefits, but that's one key area. Third area, this expansion of markets, both in geography and different fuel supplies. We're seeing a lot more growth in emerging economies, which is consistent with a net zero pathway. And we're also starting to see policies being put in place on shipping and aviation fuels, which I think is a significant change. When I started doing some of these forecasts 3 years ago, there was almost nothing on shipping and aviation. And now every year I'm increasing by 50% some of the forecasts. The number of projects is doubling. So there's a lot of movement in that area. So overcoming the barriers, I would view these as areas to focus on. There's obviously a lot more detail beyond these 5 bullets on here, but one is identifying these new markets and really doing a detailed assessment, the roadmaps, the feedstock supply potential, the types of technologies to help expand these fuels. Focusing on this feedstock question, I think, is critically important, and there's a number of different levels there. One part of it is accelerating technology deployment. In the scenario, you absolutely need technologies that can convert different feedstocks into biofuels. There's an ongoing discussion on sustainability frameworks, life cycle carbon accounting, and I think that needs to continue as well. And then in support of these conversations, enhancing international collaboration efforts as well, because there's so much that has already been done around the world, and sharing that information and working together on some of these technology pathways is critical to achieving the net zero pathway that I've presented. So I'll leave it at there. Thank you very much for your attention. Do I pass this to you?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Jeremy. Very interesting. Please remain here. We might have a couple of questions from the audience. Please. Let me hand you a microphone. Yeah, Aurelie is doing.
Yeah, I'm a delegate from South Korea. In our country, actually, one of the main resources to make electricity is based on the wood pellet and wood chips.
Right.
However, because Korean people concerned over the air pollution from the solid biomass, so our government is going to reduce the share of the solid biomass to produce electricity. But according to your forecasting, actually, the solid biomass is going to take the main production for making electricity. So could you explain the relationship between air pollution and the solid biomass increases? Yeah.
I mean, one thing just to note, the net zero scenario, this is a global assessment and global totals. And so I'm speaking to that. No individual country will probably match these outcomes. So it's going to be very different for different countries. And then one piece as well on the power side, biomass provides about 4% of that energy supply, in part because there's a limited supply of bioenergy. There's other ways to produce electricity, but it does play this important balancing role in some places. And to your point, it does have other impacts on air quality. The net zero assessment also includes air quality objectives, which influence some of those results as well. You know, at a country level, every country will have a different balance and a different mix of resources. And I don't know South Korea well enough to be able to comment on that, but I think South Korea will face the same challenges as many countries, as increasing variable renewables. There's a portion that can happen fairly easily, but then balancing those supplies as you get to higher percentages requires something else to provide that balancing service. And so I don't know the role that bioenergy may play in that, but it can be batteries, hydro, some of these other technologies as well.
We have another question here.
Axel Funke, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. The carbon contained in the biofuels is also desperately needed feedstock for industry, specifically chemical industry. How do your scenarios align with that and consider that use?
Right. So we don't have this information pulled out, but I know in some of the modeling, some of the biofuels production pathways like renewable diesel, biojet will have some of these byproducts, ethylene or naphtha, that can be used in the chemical industry. But our scenarios actually still have quite a bit of oil used to produce plastics and some of these other products, but those industries are combined with carbon capture and storage along the entire supply chain, and then also some of these carbon removal technologies. So there is some of these biomolecules making their way into plastics, but there's still fossil molecules as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we can take a third question.
Good morning. I'm Alberto from IMT Business School here in France. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the sensibility that you have to technological improvement parameters for those technologies that you have in the model. Because I assume that given how these parameters progress and how they can be changed, the results can be very different. And a follow-up, have you validated this technological progression of the model with, I don't know, time series up until 2020?
Sure. So different pieces on there's one technology component, one kind of agricultural component I'll put in. For each of the technologies, there are cost declines depending on the technology pathway. Some of the more commercial technologies, those cost declines are pretty limited. The commercials technology aren't that many avenues. But for some of the advanced technologies that are still at early stages of development, there are fairly steep cost decline curves built into the model. I can't speak to each of the individual technologies, but if you follow up, I can share some of that information. On the agricultural side as well, we work with a land use model that incorporates yield improvements for agriculture. And so that will contribute as well, because feedstock price is such an important part of the biofuel cost, especially for these advanced fuels as well. So there's some effort put into that. And that's true of all the technologies in the model, right? So electric vehicles, solar, wind, all of these have some of these cost decline curves that extend over the model period. For calibration, so my work is usually on the 5-year forecast period, so that I feed that information to the modeling team that they then use to calibrate the model for the longer term. So it is using that historical data set to ensure that the parameters they're inputting are matching what we've seen historically, and then forecasting that forward.
Just a follow-up.
Yeah.
When you talk about land use, so are you taking into account? Are you taking into account the productivity in terms of climate change and declining productivity of land in terms of greenhouse gas emissions?
So important question. I got that question later. I went back to the team. I still don't have a response on that. So I'm not sure if that's included in the in that part of the model. So I have to get back on that.
Thank you.
So we have actually 145 online participants, which I would like to also welcome warmly to this workshop. And to acknowledge this, we're also going to take one question from that came up there. So it has a long introduction, and then there comes a question.
Be prepared.
So Emmanuel Goy is saying that your graph showed a large contribution of short rotation woody crops And she doesn't see expansion of cropland or encroachment into forest land. And she asks, is there an impact on food production because this is a commonly perceived risk? Or will it all occur on land that was previously used for first generation biofuels?
So a mixed answer. The aim of this scenario is not to compete with food and feed supply so that this outcome, the aim is to be consistent with that. Where these woody crops are being grown, a lot of that's on marginal land in the model. It has 3 different categories for land types, those that are high productivity for food and feed production, all the way down to poor or marginal lands. And so a lot of these rotation crops there. The reason we're showing this kind of result is that per land area, we get the most energy from these short rotation woody crops. And by 2050, those crops can be used in a range of technologies to produce liquid biofuels, biogases, or used as solid bioenergy. So that's why we're seeing this kind of result in the net zero pathway.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. So let's thank Jeremy.
So now we will welcome Christophe Kassiotis. Christophe serves as the Chief of Staff to the Director General of Energy and Climate at the Ministry of Energy Transition. And he will give you a presentation on the work ongoing on the revision of the French strategy and French climate energy strategy.
Yes, so thank you very much for the introduction. I will present in my talk the challenges of biomass closure of the French climate energy strategy. So it's an ongoing work. We are supposed to publish a draft of the energy part of this strategy before the end of the month. And we are still working on the climate part because, as you will see, we have some difficulties. And one of the difficulties is regarding the use of biomass. So first, a very classical slide on the national low carbon strategy. So we aim carbon neutrality in 2050. And we also aim a reduction of national greenhouse by 50% in 2030 in accordance to European policy. And to reach this goal, we need to double the rate of reducing that we observe currently. And one of the important part of this graph is to see that even in 2050, there remain some emissions, but these emissions are balanced by storage, and storage is in the French current low carbon strategy is mainly made with biomass. So one of the difficulty of the next policy is that we see that the feedstock is less good than expected, and we need to take into account the fact that forests are degrading. So here I present the national emission by sector. So maybe one point that is different from other countries is the fact that electricity production emit less carbon than other countries. But it does not mean that it's an easy part to treat for the remaining part. We still have some coal plant in France, and they are not that easy to shut down because they participate to the equilibrium of the network in winter, especially in the western part of France. And one of the questions is to change this use to biomass. We also see that transportation is a large part of the emission, and that heating, both in the building and in the industry, is also an important part of the emission. So here I present the expected evolution in 2030 of the energy mix of France. So our strategy is based on 3 pillars. First pillar is energy saving, with a goal of 70% of reduction of our final energy consumption by 2030. So it's the reason why this the right bar is lower. We also have a rapid electrification of use thanks to electrical vehicles. How to say that? Heating systems, new heating systems, H2 hydrogen production by electrolysis, and electrification of industrial processes. And the third pillar of the strategy is an increased use of bioenergy and other renewable heat, especially biomass, solar thermal, geothermal, and waste. So this part is here in the green block of this slide. So why it's especially important to look at the biomass looping or equilibrium in this strategy. So the climate energy strategy, it's a very iterative process, because the existing strategy asks all the sectors to produce what we call roadmaps. And if we, it's a way to ask concretely the sectors the way they will reach the goal of the strategy. And if we add all the wants of biomass by all the sectors, we see that we have a problem. For instance, industrial sector asks a lot of biomass because it's quite cheap compared to other conversion, and so we have a difficulty. The use of biomass for energy can also conflict with other objectives. For instance, ensure France food self-sufficiency, the carbon sink that I speak before, and the action we want to have on biodiversity. An important point of our strategy is that we exclude the import of biomass in first approach. It does not mean that we will never use it. For instance, we use some biomass import for 1G fuel production, but we think in the long term that it's not possible to take this into account. First, it's in contradiction with the objectives of industrial and energy sovereignty we have in France. And we also consider the fact that France is one of the largest agricultural and forestry areas in Europe. And it's not reasonable to aim for import, because other countries will also want this resource. And for them, it will be maybe more difficult to be self-sufficient. So we need, conclusion, we need to have a balance between biomass supplies and demand in our targets. And we need to have a hierarchy of use because not possible for every sector to have what. We also see that there are some competing use between energy when we look at the biomass. So it's a very warped picture. Something I want to say, I will not say it maybe in the next slide, but what is complex in biomass energy, it's also a local resource. And sometimes national policy have to take into account local consideration because the competition, for instance, of use is not the same at a national scale or local scale. I will speak, I have next a slide about the modeling process of this policy. So it's quite awful, but it's just to say that we do the stuff correctly. No, but what I want to say is that we have a quite complex model that use as an input the numbers given by working groups on different topics. Then we have some what we call sectorial models that take into account many parameters. So, for instance, let's say the aviation model take into account the evolution of the consumption of flights, the evolution of the technology, so the efficiency of the planes, and the way we can substitute old plane by new plane. So we have this kind of model for every sector. And there is a specific tool in our architecture that is take into account the biomass looping. So for instance, if you need more artificial fertilizer, yes, there is it has an impact on the emission and on the production of fertilizers, but it can increase the growth of the biomass. But okay, so there is a specific tool that take into account the biomass looping. And then it produces some figures that you present to the political level. And the political level then can have some, then can take some decision, and you run against the system. Because when you present the number, sometimes they do not agree, and you have to do it. Make this kind of simulation it's a quite long process. It takes a few months, and so we can't iterate as much as the political level wants, but we try to do our best. So what are the results of the modeling? So this is what I present are the results of the run 2. So it's we did the first run, let's say 1 year ago. Then we had difficulties to get some decision of the number we presented. So we did run 1 bis. That was never very official. And then we are currently having discussion on the results of this run 2. So it does not mean that it will be directly the next climate and energy policy, but it means it's the base of the discussion we have at a political level now. So, so this is this slide presents the biomass supply. So we see that to reach the needs, we need a very significant effort by the agricultural sector and better use of crop residues, intermediate crops, lignocellulosic crops, and wood outside forest and other effluents. And for the forest, we see a slight increase of the forest biomass. So result of this slide. Regarding the use, the main use is made by industry, so it's the blue square. Other use by residential or heat networks and for other building. Some of the biomass is used for electricity production, thanks to solid or liquid biomass. And there is other use, as for instance, for agriculture. When we compute the number for every year, what is very important is that we are close to equilibrium until 2030, and we can have equilibrium in 2050, but we have a problem in 2040. And this is due to the fact that there is the consumption of fuel decrease only after 2040 in our models, because the electricity vehicles are the sales of thermal vehicles is forbidden only in 2045. So the decrease of the thermal vehicles sold in 2045 will still run in 2040. And then we can compare supply demand by vector. So for gas, solid, liquid, and we can see that one of the main difference we have between supply and demand is for gas vector in 2030, for instance. So, okay, same idea, but presented in a different way. And now I will speak a little bit about the prioritization of uses. So what we have, 1 minute. Okay, so I will finish here, but the discussion we have for the moment is about this big table. So so in France, we created 1 year ago what is called Secrétariat Général pour l'écologie. So it's a public body that is directly linked to the First Minister, and that is in charge of doing this kind of arbitrage between the different ministers. So we are in charge of the climate simulation and of the energy part of production. But as you can imagine, there are many debates between the different ministries of what they want. So for instance, the industry, they want to have most of the biomass resources. And so they say that so for instance, they really want a sharp decrease of residential heating by biomass. And other ministry, for instance, agriculture, they want to save the feedstock for feeding animals. So this kind of discussion we have currently in order to establish the prioritization of the biomass.
Thank you very much, Christophe, for this very interesting presentation. So,
not very conclusive, but
but the work is ongoing. We have the time for 2 or 3 questions. So.
Good morning, Maria Georgiadou from the European Commission. Interesting to see the results of the model for the mismatch in 2040, that you will not, because of the assumption of the model that the electric vehicles are on after this time, that the thermal engine is banned in 2040 only. But I am curious to see whether in your other simulations, you have matched that the extra electricity that you need in 2040 to run the fleet of the electric vehicles that will be in place is available, including all the other uses that the electricity, the renewable electricity, I assume, or low carbon emitted electricity will be there. Have you matched? That will be an interesting comparison.
Okay, so I have another awful presentation about electricity buckling because it's another very important topic. But what I can say, we are really able to meet the demand in 2040 and in 2045. The main driver is the availability of the because what we observe in 2021 and in 2022 was a very low availability of this fleet. But if we are able to recover historical and are able to recover the historical disponibility of the fleet, we are really able to reach the demand. Another important point is that we need more electricity, and the only way to have more electricity is to install new renewable, because it's the time scale of nuclear will not make available new reactors before 2030. in France. So
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Birger Kerko, Agency for Renewable Resources in Germany. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question to your modeling assumptions. I couldn't find organic waste streams in your feedstock base. Maybe I overlooked it and I just compared it with what Jeremy Woodhouse said before, where it was quite an important component in 2040 and 2050. However, I still found dedicated crops still in the 2050 scenario, and I wondered what maybe you could provide a background to both feedstocks.
So I'm not sure that I have the competency to answer such detailed question, but organic fertilizers are taken into account in the model, and we still need 1G. It was not the question. I'm sorry. And we still have 1G fuel production in 2030. Because what is taken into account in the model is that we have existing 1G factories in France, and they will still be there in 2030. So we need to feed them.
Yeah, thank you for 2030, definitively, but I saw it also for 2050, if I'm not mistaken. And it was not about, let's say, organic manures, but it was about also organic fraction of waste, so of household waste, things like that. So, or is this not considered as biomass in the French calculation?
Okay.
So the organic fraction of waste, not directly from agriculture, but food waste and so on and so on.
Yes. Waste are taken into account in the model, and there is a specific model for waste management, and and it's also a policy that we have to articulate, because there is a waste policies that want to decrease the volume of waste globally, and so it's something that we have to take into consideration.
Okay, thank you. So we have online question.
Yes, we have one online question. What about sludge as a feedstock for biogas production?
What about?
Sludge.
Okay. Taken into account.
Okay, thank you very much, Christophe. So I give you, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. So with this, we come to the next presentation from Canada. We have Oshada Mendis with us, who is a Deputy Director of the Clean Fuels Portfolio in the Office of Energy Research and Development at Natural Resources Canada. And he will talk to us about the role of bioenergy in Canada's energy strategies. Oshada, please.
Merci pour la présentation, Dina, et merci à nos merveilleux hôtes. Cette présentation, la bioénergie dans un avenir net zéro au Canada, sera en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions en français et si qu'elles sont lentes, je serai heureux d'y répondre. So, yeah, let's get into it. What's great about presenting bioenergy to a group like this is you don't have to really do the convincing of why it's important, and that's great because, let's see, Jeremy Moorhouse also did a better job than I would anyways. So when I think forecasts out to 2050, I always start with the International Energy Agency as well. And so I'll do this quickly. The keys that I'm going to highlight again from Jeremy's excellent presentation is really the stark increase in bioenergy out to 2030. That's what's shown on the left here. And on the right, the variety of uses in industrial applications, or sorry, in the most difficult to decarbonize applications such as industry, transport, and buildings. So really the future of bioenergy is quite bright, and that's good for us in Canada because we have a lot of it. Canada is the second largest country in the world and third as ranked by forested area. but of course, forestry is not the only type of bioenergy available. The Canada Energy Regulator has put this chart together and has characterized 6 different types of biomass feedstocks. And this chart shows the variety of biomass on a regional basis. So on the x-axis, you have the different regions in Canada. These would be provinces and territories. And what I'd like to highlight here is that right now, feedstock is not limited, but in this future scenario where there's a significant increase and it's used in a variety of applications, we may not have the exact biomass feedstock type that we need for a certain conversion pathway for a specific end use in the quantity that we need it. And that's really the crux of my presentation. And I thought Christophe did an excellent job with the French model. So I'd really love to put my colleagues in touch with his to deepen that conversation. And so in terms of how we're approaching this from a Canadian perspective, it's very similar to the French perspective. And this model was put together by my colleagues at CanMet Énergie Varennes. This is a government lab in the province of Quebec within Natural Resources Canada. And unlucky for me, it's probably 3:30 in the morning over there in Quebec, so I don't think I'll be able to phone a friend. So let's hope I can do this justice. So the model is like this: review modern bioenergy pathways, ensure there's solid modeling and simulation of production pathways, conduct TEAs, LCAs, E3 models, ensure that we're doing market assessments, especially in regional contexts, and in particular where it comes to feedstock availability and delivered costs. And then, of course, like any good model in present day, leveraging artificial intelligence to make sure it's bigger, it's faster, and then, of course, iterate and optimize to ensure that we have the best model possible. So next, I'd like to talk about a critical analysis tool, the multi-criteria approach with weighted factors. This is a really important part of how our lab decides to identify and prioritize high-impact bioenergy uses. And so after this slide, I'll show a case study of the province of Quebec where it comes to industrial uses of bioenergy for decarbonization. And the methodology starts with setting an objective. And so the objective for this case study is to optimize GHG reductions in industrial facilities considering technical and economic considerations. And now let's get into the weight factors. So these are in the colored circles, and the size of the circle corresponds to the impact for the model in the analysis. And note, there is not one correct set of factors and or weights. This is where the science sort of meets the art. It really depends on the user's objective and the objective for the analysis and the decarbonization goals of a specific region or context. And so to determine these weights, our lab in Quebec sent out a survey to experts in the region to get a starting point for these numbers. Then they facilitated meetings to discuss and refine where they ended up with the values that you see here. And so I'm going to get into some of the factors very briefly. So I'll start with alternative solutions. And so this would cover, let's take light duty transportation as an example. So of course we can use bioenergy to make cellulosic ethanol, blend with gasoline, decarbonize that mode of emission. But I think globally, we've come to the conclusion that electrification is a better option. So the model would look at that alternative solution and then probably spit out that that's not the best use of biomass because consumption will be significantly decreased in the future. And so another weight factor would be technical constraints. So this would be the technical feasibility of converting the biomass to the bioenergy required for a certain decarbonization process, and also the technical feasibility of using that mode of bioenergy. And I think a good example here is biocarbon. So of course, the steel and iron ore industry would love to use more biocarbon in their processes for decarbonization, but a high barrier I've heard from some of my stakeholders is that the quality requirement is extremely severe and it's sensitive in that process. And that's become a real hindrance to utilizing more biocarbon, and the model will take that into effect as well. And then other, the model also gets quite detailed. So I'll talk quickly about retrofitting costs. A good example here is torrefied wood pellets used in the cement industry, for example. So if a cement plant were to use this type of biomass, most likely they would need new infrastructure in the way of a conveyor belt. And so the model would compare this to something like RNG, which would need little to no new infrastructure to be utilized in that decarbonization option. Other factors for this study include biomass conversion, the cost of that conversion, access to biomass, CCS and BECCS potential, which I'll cover a bit later, and the fuel that's being displaced. So next, I'm going to show one of the outputs of this model. And so this is what's termed a Sankey diagram. And this diagram is used to visualize the higher impact opportunities for decarbonizing industry via bioenergy. And I'll note that this analysis covered all industrial sites in the province of Quebec that emitted more than 25 kilotons of emissions per year. And transport was only included where it fell within the site boundary. So for example, transport for a mining site. And at a high level, the model determined that there is a demand of 16 million oven-dry tons per year, which can result in a reduction of almost 11 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year. Now, how to read this diagram. So if we start at the top left in blue, this is biochar. And then as we go right, we see in priority from top to bottom, where the model suggests this bioenergy be prioritized. So as we can see here, or as I can see here, you probably can't, but I'll read it out for you. Biochar gets split out into use in a pelletizing furnace, an electric arc furnace, and the majority goes into anode baking and a reheating furnace. And so again, I'll just highlight that the Sankey prioritizes uses, and that should be read from top to bottom. And again, I'll reiterate the number 16.11 megatons of oven-dry biomass is what the model deemed necessary. And this isn't net zero, this is all the high impact uses. So let's keep that in consideration, because the model also evaluates what is currently available. And that's based on what the model deemed as available, which is based on many factors, including sustainability, economic viability, competition with other pathways. It appears only 29% of the biomass required is available, and that results in 35% of the emissions reduction. I'm going to reiterate those numbers because I think that really points out the case. It's not 29% of the feedstock will result in 29% of the emissions. You get a benefit because the model has prioritized the high impact uses. And of course, this number is based on a variety of assumptions. As such, the real number could be higher or lower. But the model is suggesting that the amount of biomass required in Quebec for high impact uses of biomass to decarbonize industrial facilities is just not there in the quantity that we need it. And then I'll also, is there a way to go back? Ah, perfect. And lastly, I'll just highlight here, you know what, it doesn't look like it's green, but the top 5 uses are highlighted in green, and that shows what the available biomass should be prioritized in Quebec in these industrial facilities, and that covers the 29% of feedstock that's available. And I think I'm running out of time, and there's something else that I really want to cover, so I'm going to skip this slide. Really, this is just a sensitivity analysis showing different Sankey diagrams for different weight factors and weighting criteria, and you know, as any model goes, inputs determine the outputs. So yeah, I'd really like to get to order of merit before I close. And so this is something my colleagues at, again, CanMet Energy VRN, or CEV, have done. They've taken the strategic evaluation of high impact bioenergy uses in decarbonization options one step further. And they've developed something that's similar to the CCUS and hydrogen ladders, if you're familiar with those. And at a very high level, the order of merit leverages case studies, models, simulations, net zero studies, an in-house biomass conversion tool, and of course, that multi-criteria analysis. And before presenting the order of merit, I'm just going to outline a few caveats. The analysis that fed into this model is general. It's for Canada in 2023. And however, I mentioned Canada's a very large country, so this can't be taken into a very specific regional context. If you would like to do it again for a province or a specific city, the model needs to be updated. And again, the criteria and weighting are just one case study for this output. As I mentioned before, it really is a mix of art and science and depends on the objectives for the location. And lastly, there are some end products and end uses that compete against many other alternatives, namely electrification and electrolytic hydrogen. And there are some that do not have any good competitive alternatives, and those you'll see float to the top. So without further ado, the order of merit. And I'm going to pause here for a minute because this is a lot of information to take in. So maybe I'll start with just a few general comments, as this is all predicated on the position that biomass availability will be limited in the future scenario. And as such, that predication suggests that there is not enough bioenergy for every end use and definitely not every industrial end use. And so electrification must be favored in a lot of subsectors, but of course we know electrification cannot decarbonize every end use. There are very difficult to electrify scenarios, and that's where biomass, especially in high temperature processes, which can be combined with carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, or BECCS, can result in negative emissions, which is really important. So I'll also highlight that several solid biomass applications serve as both energy sources and carbon sources, so think chemical reagent, increasing their merit in this model. And also for the cement and lime sectors, most of the emissions are process emissions, and the use of bioenergy in these sectors are being prioritized because, again, in the long term, they can be combined with CCUS. And so let's get into the model a little bit. The blue to the gray is technology maturity. And so in the blue, we have technologies that are commercial, and as we move to the gray, more emerging technologies. And then the green, yellow, and orange color. So green are use cases that should be prioritized. For these, in most cases, there is no other option for decarbonization, and the carbon is sequestered in the long term. And so where possible, these are no-brainers. The yellow are also generally good cases. There's potential for high sequestration, but it's not always a better energy efficiency versus the alternative. And the orange, to be clear, are not bad options by any means. They just need a little more context and consideration. In some cases, they are also no-brainers, and in other cases, there are better alternatives. And even though there may not be a great alternative, it still may not make sense to decarbonize with bioenergy, and it may not make sense to decarbonize at all. And I know that seems like maybe a wild assumption, but in every net zero model that I've read, and as shown by our colleagues, Emmanuel, Christophe, and Jeremy, there is, in 2050, some emissions. We're not getting every sector to zero emissions, it's net zero. And that's also predicated on the necessity for negative emissions via bioenergy, DAC, and potential future other sources. So, I mean, if we could get every sector to zero, of course I'd be supportive, who wouldn't? I just don't think that that's realistic. And so, as I'm running out of time here, I'll finish with this. One, biomass is certainly not limited today, especially in Canada. There has been no bioenergy project that has been hindered by feedstock availability. Two, bioenergy has a very bright future. It will certainly play a large role in Canada and the rest of the world in reaching net zero. As I mentioned, there are numerous processes where bioenergy can be used to decarbonize, and also what I think is critically important, generate negative emissions. And 3, because of these numerous use cases and projected significant increases, I believe there is a scenario where we will reach a point of not having enough biomass. And I think, and that's similar to every other type of solution for climate change. I mean, there's a lot of discussion around electrical grids reaching capacity and needing to be strategic. And that's no different for bioenergy. These types of discussions, these types of forums are extremely important in sharing with the international community, because that model that Christophe presented was excellent. And so it'd be great to connect these experts, continue this discussion to make sure that we have the right mix of energies going forward to give us the best chance to reach net zero in 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Oshada, for an excellent presentation and pointing out the key messages so well. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions, maybe. Let's see what we have here in the room.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Can you go 1 slide back, please? So in the model, do you take into account the societal value that the product has generated? You know, if you look at this order of merit, it has to do with availability and maybe complexity of molecule structures. But if you ask a person to make a choice between space heating or a face cream or a toy, they would probably prefer space heating if that was the alternative to choose from your limited resource. So is there some sort of, what is the added value of the product to society? Because that's not often reflected in these orders of merit.
And that's a great question, Bas. So my technical knowledge of the model is a bit limited. As I mentioned, it was developed by our colleagues at Energy VN. And I do not believe that that consideration has been taken for the development of this model. I mean, this is such a complex issue, and this is a lot of information being put on 1 slide. And really, it is to generate discussion, spark, even controversial ideas. So I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts, either now or during the breaks. But no, great point. I think I'm just trying to picture how that would be modeled, and that just seems so complex. But no, I don't believe that's taken into consideration.
Thank you. We have a question by Christophe here, and then one online.
One of the big difference we have in the results is the place for biohydrogen. Can you elaborate a little more on maybe the alternative with the electrolysis and the way you take this into account in your model?
Sorry, the alternative with...
in fact, in your model, you say that it's possible or pertinent to use biohydrogen in some sectors. And in France, we really don't have the same conclusion. And so it's one of the differences that strikes me. Mm-hmm. And so maybe can you say a little more on biohydrogen and why you see the pertinence of this use?
Definitely, that's a great point, and that really highlights the different regional perspectives that are required in a model like this. And the benefit of biohydrogen is that it can be combined with BECCS to provide negative emissions via gasification pathway. And I think that's where we need to go for a lot of these high impact uses, is focusing on that negative emissions pathway. And that's why biohydrogen is being prioritized, in things like iron and steel in the direct, in terms of the furnace. And I also see it in the pulp and paper industry. I think the key here is really the opportunity for negative emissions.
So there is a question from the online audience. What sources of data does the model use to give conclusions and prioritize uses of resources? Where is the source data coming from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to go back to the slide here. This is really the information that feeds into the order of merit. So VN has been doing some exceptional work with the industrial community in the province of Quebec. So they have very detailed PNIDs, which, they have this type of data very specific for industrial sites. And so even in the Sankey diagram that I showed, it's not just, you know, a reduction of emissions in the iron industry. It's very specific. It's used in an electric arc furnace. And that type of detail is only possible if you have very detailed data going into the model. So again, it's not just net zero studies. It's not just TEAs, LCAs. It's direct, detailed work with sites that emit significant quantities, like these industrial applications.
Excuse me, I just have a very short question, follow up on Christophe's question. So I'm Aisha Kamishi from ADEME, and I just want to know if you take in account the energy efficiency for each pathway when you did this work.
Certainly, that is a very important aspect of it when it comes to the energy efficiency and also the carbon efficiency when you want to prioritize the use of a certain bioenergy in an application. Yeah, it's a very important piece, and that's a great question.
Thank you. So very interesting. And I think by the time the Canadians get up in the morning, there will be an email like, get in touch with. Thank you very much, Oshada.
No problem. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. So now we will welcome Jim Spaeth from the US Department of Energy. So Jim is, serves as a Systems Development and Integration Program Manager for US Department. So thank you, Jim.
Bonjour. Hopefully you have my presentation. So a little bit of background, like France, like Canada, the US has goals of a net zero clean economy by 2050 and a completely green grid by 2035, which is going to be a very ambitious, very aggressive goal. The US also has currently the largest biofuels industry in the world, based on two fuels, ethanol being the largest, approximately 16 or 17 billion gallons of production every year, a little less than 1 billion exported, and then approximately 3 billion gallons of bio-based diesel, a combination of biodiesel and renewable diesel. So we do see that as we transition that, in particular, that ethanol usage is going to go way down unless it's targeted elsewhere, because we expect heavy electrification of the light-duty vehicle sector. So we expect a lot of transitions in the transportation sector. But what's really getting most of the attention in the United States at the moment in the bioenergy space is aviation fuels. So 2 years ago, the White House and the US government agencies articulated what we call our Sustainable Aviation Fuel Grand Challenge. And the Grand Challenge calls for 3 billion gallons of SAF production by 2030 and approximately 35 billion gallons by 2050, with the goal of by 2050 displacing all fossil jet fuel. And so the aviation fuel goals are really getting most of the attention, almost all the attention, energy, financing, interest in the bioenergy space at the moment. It's this aviation sector. Secondarily, there's a lot of interest, a lot of focus on marine fuels, and lower quality biofuels can perhaps be used for marine fuels. So that sort of equation in terms of how to optimize use of biomass for biofuels will happen over time and probably be largely market driven. Additionally, it's been mentioned here a number of times, is there enough biomass resource to go around? In the US, going back to 2006, we had a study that's referred to as the billion ton study. It's been revised several times. It's a very detailed study looking at biomass resources available in the US, and it's actually being updated again this year. And the billion ton study, as it's updated, we are seeing results that we expect actually to be able to have as much as 2 billion tons per year of biomass available by 2050 for these various uses. And we project with that much biomass that we could produce the 35 billion gallons for SAF by 2050, another approximately 30 billion gallons for other uses, renewable diesel, other heavy duty applications, and still have enough for uses like approximately 400 million tons of biochemicals. So there's a lot to go around. These assumptions call for no additional land use displacing food crops, but it does call for a great deal of greater use of agricultural waste and in addition, dedicated energy crops on lands that are much more marginal, not currently in use for food and not expected to ever be used for food. But to get from our current usage of approximately 300 million tons per year of biomass up to 2 billion tons or something in that range does require a great deal of enhancement of additional waste uses, municipal solid waste, food waste, wastewater treatment residues, and in particular this the agricultural waste and dedicated energy crops on marginal lands. So I'd like to, there's a lot of attention that has been placed on the US for various laws that we passed recently. I'll talk about them briefly and talk about bioenergy in the context. So you may have heard some of these acronyms, but 2 years ago in 2021, something called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was passed, and it created or set aside $63 billion of new money for energy and climate activities. And shortly after that, this law, referred to as the CHIPS Act, was created, setting aside $280 billion, largely focused on cutting edge science and microtechnology, microchip technology, with the emphasis here being trying to reduce our dependence on foreign imports of microchip technology. And then more recently, in August of 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. And this was the biggest stimulus, much larger stimulus for clean energy technologies, $391 billion available, a one-time supplement. So between these two, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act that we refer to as the IRA, and please excuse the lack of sensitivity to the UK and Ireland, but when the US thinks of the IRA, they think about their 401k first and not challenges in the past in Ireland. So between these two, $450 billion was set aside a one-time use for investments of all of clean technology. And this is truly unprecedented, truly historic for the US. In our prior history, the single largest and only real large single impact or set aside for clean technology goes back to the first year of President Obama in 2009. And that was approximately $70 billion set aside, a one-time increment. Most of that for clean technology, but various clean energy applications. But so now we're going for a jump of 70 billion to in President Biden's first year and second year to $450 billion. And it's in this context that we're expecting a bit of a, hopefully a large revolution in the clean technology space for the US and setting aside the conditions or creating the conditions that can allow us to eventually reach these 2030, 2035, 2050 type of clean technology goals. Other things that are very important in the bioenergy space that will help enable, in particular the SAF, are a number of clean fuel tax credits. There are some existing tax credits that have been around for a while that have been extended. More importantly, there's a specific SAF tax credit that was created just for 2 years, for this year and next year. And after that, SAF will have to compete with a more generic clean fuels production tax credit for the next 3 years. And there's also some very generous hydrogen production tax credits that are expected to greatly help the bioenergy industry with the need for hydrogen. And it's well recognized by industry that 5 years of new tax credits is not nearly enough to create a new industry, especially since it takes about 5 years from saying go to actually building a biofuels plant. So industry is working hard to make sure that these tax windows for getting in place are extended, changed, and modified. In addition, under these new laws, something called the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations was created. This is a new DOE division focused specifically on the demonstration phase of projects. And it's focused though on these different technologies and not specifically on bioenergy. $25 billion set aside for these projects, but it's expected that technologies like, or the funding going to places like the hydrogen hubs and carbon management, rural and remote communities can help complement bioenergy needs and help result in bioenergy stimulation. In my home program office, the Bioenergy Technologies office within DOE, we have an annual budget of approximately $250 million per year. It's spread over multiple technology space from like TRL space from 2 through 7. And we estimate that about 80% of this annual budget can be applicable and helpful to SAF and marine and various heavy duty applications. I personally manage the portion of the portfolio focused on pre-pilot and pilot and demonstration. So we're working hard to scale these various technologies and get, in particular, new SAF technologies beyond HEFA into the commercial space. We recognize that with the goals of, say, 3 billion gallons by 2030, a lot of that, most of that will be satisfied with HEFA technologies, but there are certainly questions in mind about are there enough oil-based crops and fats, oils, and greases to meet those 3 billion gallons of the goal. And the estimates range from, we could easily do 1 billion to some people estimate we could do 4 or 5 billion gallons. The estimates are all over the place, and so hard to say, but we expect other technologies to be coming online, and that's where we're really trying to help out with technologies like gasification of Fischer-Tropsch, alcohol to jet, hydrothermal liquefaction, pyrolysis technologies, etc. Also, we have a very robust loan program that under these new laws was enhanced greatly. There's $250 billion of new loan authority that was created. And I'm aware that there's approximately $20 billion worth of loan applications in the pipeline within the system for biofuel projects. There's only one that I'm aware of that is pretty far along in the process, a company that many of you have probably heard of if you're following the biofuel space, and that's Gevo. And Gevo is far along in its loan application process and is hoping to get approximately $1 billion loan guarantees. So this can be very important, very helpful in the bioenergy space. Also, out of these laws, there was a one-time $300 million grant authority created under the Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration. So this is the organization that has historically funded all of our aviation technology development and regulation, international engagement, works with organizations like ICAO and works with CORSIA and such important regulations. But this is a one-time set of grants that has just been put on the street, money made available with applications due on November 27th for a broad range of technologies for building supply chains for SAF. And lastly, I just wanted to point out that within DOE, there's a quite wide-ranging ecosystem of different types of programs that are available for technology stimulation. For example, the Office of Science, which is here, science, is approximately a $600 million per year program with a couple $100 million that goes into fundamental biochemical, bioorganism type of research. So very early TRL stage, TRL 1, 2. We've got programs like small business programs to help get small companies started. RPE that many of you probably heard about focuses on distinct technical challenges in like 3 or 4 year segments. Like they'll point out a distinct technical conversion pathway that needs help and focus on that. And applied offices like my home office, the Bioenergy Technologies office, takes these technologies more from, they say, TRLs 3, 4-ish through demonstration. I just talked about the loan program office and the demonstration program office. So it's a very complex set of programs and smorgasbord here of how to get grant assistance. But rather than a future mandate for gallons, volume gallons of fuel, the U.S. has set up more of an incentive and assistance program trying to stimulate bioenergy development, biofuel development. And there's been a tremendously strong response from industry and interest from airlines in stepping up to the plate and making investments. And we're hoping that it results in meeting our SAF Grand Challenge goals. And thank you for your time, and I'll wrap up there.
Thank you very much, Jim. It was a very interesting presentation showing the impressive investment for clean energy in US. So thank you very much for that. I forgot to mention that Jim replaced the presentation from the Ministry of Brazil because she was not able to make it. She had to fly back to the office earlier. So thank you for that also. So we have some time for 2 or 3 questions for Jim.
I'll just add in a little bit of summation that a lot of people in other countries think that the IRA was this huge dollar stimulus for SAF, and in particular, but pointing out that the dollars directly focused on staff were very modest. It's this $300 million grant program. And it's mostly the help of the tax incentives that is really expected to be the larger stimulus. So previously our industry, our biofuels industry was built on mandates, volumetric mandates, the RFS. It's been tremendously successful, but now we've transitioned to more of this incentive-based approach. So we'll see how it works out.
Thanks, Jim. Interesting talk as ever. What's your view on what the most promising SAF technologies are in the sort of landscape of technologies coming forward?
Well, beyond HEFA, I think there are many different technologies, conversion pathways that are promising, and we need many of them. I think alcohol to jet will be successful, and with various other carbon saving approaches like smart agriculture and even carbon capture can be a very effective GHG reducing technology. Gasification of Fischer-Tropsch, we hope will be very successful. Pyrolysis and hydrothermal liquefaction, we think have a place to play. Hydrothermal liquefaction in particular with water or wet feedstocks like municipal solid waste or water treatment plant feedstocks. But we really need them all to be able to use the wide range of biomass feedstocks that we would like to use to reach those high gallons. We really need many different pathways, not just a few. And so we're trying to invest in a wide range of different technologies to get to our future goals.
I have one question, thank you. You show a slide with a target of 100% of domestic fuel production on US, but I didn't see the share between the fossil fuel, the biofuel, and also on synthetic fuel. I don't know if you have any target on this biofuel and synthetic fuel compared to the fossil fuel.
So in particular for aviation fuel,
yes, SAF.
Our 2050 target is to displace all of the fossil jet fuel.
So the 100% of
is our goal.
Only biofuel?
That's our goal.
Renewable.
That's our goal. Okay. We do expect smaller percentages of aviation to be helped by hydrogen and small scale electrification technologies, things like that. But we do think that the majority of the aviation decarbonization will come from biofuels, at least through 2050.
One question for me.
One question there.
Yeah. For the feedstock, do you have any sustainability requirements on the biogenic part?
Yes, a minimum of 50% GHG requirement to even qualify for any of these tax credits, but our goals are much higher. We're expecting even alcohol to jet to be at least 70%, 80% GHG reducing, and a lot of these technologies are going to be going towards 100% wherever possible.
So we will take the last question, very short.
I think it's quite quick. Do you have any imports in your 100% scenario, or is that entirely from domestic resource?
I think the scenario is that it could be satisfied without imports, but we expect exports and imports in these future markets. And we fully expect that there's no such thing as an only successful US SAF industry. It has to be very much a global SAF industry, or this will not work. So.
Okay, thank you very much again, Jim. It's time to thank you all the speakers this morning. So perhaps we can close again. So thank you very much. So now it's the coffee break. So we will meet in the room in let's say 15 minutes. 20 minutes. So see you then. Thank you.